And welcome back everyone to a video feature today. This will actually be an unboxing, unveiling, review, demonstration, sound overview of the very amazing Korg littleBits synthesizer kit. If you're not familiar with this kit, it is, for me, one of the coolest pieces of electronic gear that I own. And I'm comparing it to all my gear out here, my Euro rack, my electroacoustic instruments, my Soma synths and drones, other VSTs I use all the time. And I'll actually make the argument in this video today that this is one of the most overlooked and useful synthesizers, and indeed really multi sound effect, even a light unit. You can, if you want, replicate some of the effects of the say Coma Field Kit. You could hook up a DC motor, you could hook up a lot of different devices. There are sensors we'll be talking about in this review, ranging from pressure sensors to others that we can incorporate with prototyping modules. And for me, it's a kit that is incredibly creative. I think unfortunately it's been labeled as sort of a gimmick for children or something like this, when in fact you can use this synthesizer in some ways that will really complement your Eurorack setup, your other instruments, your semi-modular gear, your synthesizers. You can really take advantage of what is available with the Korg littleBits. And throughout this review and unboxing and demo, I'll be talking about all the various units, and the first thing you can see here is that these have snap together magnets, and they're actually really strong magnets. And you can see on the bottom they have a similar look to them. They have the littleBits logo, and indeed littleBits, if you're curious, go to the littleBits website. They certainly don't just make synthesizer kits, they make all sorts of Arduino kits, kits for young science minds, for kids, for teachers. Their kits and individual modules can be a little expensive, but I think it's one of the things to think about if you're getting into something like this is, will this serve your purposes? For me, it serves quite a few purposes, including a microenvironment series that I've shared with you in some of my videos and will continue to share in video experiments and music that I produce. For me, having something this small, and indeed having it, as I'll show you later, in a case that I can carry with me, I can do in a very small setup like this one using, say, one effects unit and synthesizer, which is the amazing Korg NTS1. Check out my review, unboxing, and demo on that. I could have a pedal like the Chase Bliss Audio Mood, which is one of the top pedals out there for really experimental multi-sounds in terms of effects units. And keep in mind with the NTS1, in addition to the sound, you can use 3 simultaneous effects. We'll take advantage of some of that today. What I would argue is, for me, one of my first uses for the littleBits was to have a small micro environment set up like this. This is a very small table. I typically use this when I'm gigging with my blues band, and I will put my equipment on here. It can hold a laptop, but it's also perfect for using in my small studio here. It allows me to stand up and to really tweak and get down really quite dirty with these, because these are really meant for experimentation in terms of tweaking, adding units. And what's very cool about the littleBits kit, as you can see from the beginning, is the ability to add modules on the fly. You can, in some cases, modulate or add trigger ins or outs to various modules depending on what you're using. You can chain things together. The coolest thing about this, and I would make the argument in this video today that if you ask me what is my one desert island synth, I would take a Korg littleBits over Yamaha CS80. That sounds totally wacky and crazy, but two reasons for that. One is the portability, including the battery power. I don't know how you're going to power a CS80 on a desert island unless you have some major solar power. That's going to take a lot of power. You simply turn it on. I'm actually hearing some sound there. And you're running this off a 9-volt battery. I'll show you some different setups in this video. I actually have purchased over time. In fact, I just have another one coming in the mail in a couple days. I got a steal on the littleBits on eBay. And I've been, over the last 2 years or so, trying to build up the kit. I'll show you what a base model includes in terms of what you get out of the box. And I'll talk about how you can purchase multiple kits and really add on additional oscillators You could add on other units that don't come in the Korg's kit, and you would actually either have to get these secondhand, say on eBay or Etsy, Amazon, or order them directly from littleBits. They can sometimes be expensive. Some of the modules could be up to $20, even $30. I really wanted the CV in, CV out module, which allows syncing between my Eurorack gear, other synthesizers and units out there, and the Korg littleBits going in and out of the unit. So this was one that was kind of a purchase that I thought, it's kind of expensive, but I really do need it to make this system work with everything else in my environment here. So my goal really was to say, how can I create a kit that's a microenvironment kit that could be used in a portable sense? My other reason I mentioned I would take this over a CS80 on a desert island, one reason was the power and the size of it. That really the second reason is the ability to experiment with these modules. What I like about this, and if you're thinking about getting into Eurorack, you have the semi-modular gear route that you can go. Teenage Engineering, created their own modular system. There's all sorts of crazy gear coming out. I'm hearing that Behringer is going to possibly clone an ARP 2500. Imagine what that's going to be like. So if Behringer does that, certainly we will continue to see exciting semi-modular gear out there, and not just from Behringer, but from other companies as well. Behringer deserves some note, controversially, right, because of some of their policies, but nonetheless, they're producing gear that makes it very affordable for people to do Eurorack semi-modular experiments. The Korg littleBits you could for around $100. I recently got for about $80 used. A basic set. I'll show you what that includes. As I said, I ended up buying other modules to add on to it, including, say, my trigger module, this particular sensor module, a few others as well. Some of them you could use really outside of the world of sound. This is actually and I think it's just about lost its luminosity. You can't even see this, but I purchased this secondhand, and it appears to me like the whatever filament is in here, you can barely see some of the green there kind of peeking through. But this is like a light, and you could use it to actually light up as you're performing. So if you were doing something in a small space, a club, a store, something like this, although during COVID right now this is a challenge, you could use some of this in conjunction with your gear to create lighting effects. And in fact, this is even easier to use. You can take something like this as an RGB effect, and you could add it anywhere in line. Let's say I could put it in my block here right in front of the sequencer, and then it's going to light up. Let me see if you can see that on the camera. I believe you'll be able to catch that, hopefully from one of my cameras. But what's kind of cool about it is that, and let me just hold it up to the camera here. I think you can see that now. Okay, actually I just recentered the littleBits because I realized my top camera wasn't quite getting it. And so one of the things to mention initially is that, and you heard that a second ago, is if you disconnect the unit, you obviously lose your sound. It's reminds me of those old State Fair circuit kits that kids would make when you would go to the fair. It's very simple in appearance, and of course any one of these circuit boards is incredibly complex. Now it should be said that unlike my modular gear here, if I look at my quad operator, I have at any time 16 to 20, depending on a module here. You could have with my assimilator 32, maybe more different inputs and outputs with CV. So one of the things the little kits is not, of course, going to do is give you plug and play modulation that you would have with typical 35 millimeter Eurorack cables. Again, there's one exception. I can use this to take a CV signal in or out, and a lot of the modules have adjustments in terms of oscillator, in terms of different minor features of the modules, and you sometimes have to use a mini screwdriver. It's handy maybe to have one of those around, because some of these are really hard to push with your fingers. So obviously in terms of modulation and effects and things of that nature, you're not going to get the level of complexity you would with your Eurorack semi-modular setup, whatever you happen to have. I actually kind of like that, and one of the reasons I say I would take this particular unit over a CS80 on a desert island for a synth is because of the creativity and the physicality of it. Of course, modular itself is very physical. You look at the Folk Tech with its DuPont cables here, and it has that same appeal to me. And I love plugging cables and taking them out and seeing what modulations and changes happen to sounds and control voltage and other aspects of the modules. What I like about the littleBits is that I can start very simple. For example, if I take out, and this is so cool because if I have a splitter, there are different modules, and the magnets sometimes have a mind of their own, but I can easily split a signal of any sort. I can take a power signal with this particular splitter, and I can power multiple modules. And it's important to note that you do need, of course, power running every module, so that's important. You can also get one of these, a fork. These do not particularly come with the base kit, so again, if you want to expand your system to give it more power, as I did, you do have to buy some modules. That does require a little bit of cost, and only available typically for most of these. You can find a few of these online on eBay or Etsy. Mostly only available from littleBits, the website. And again, somewhat pricey. One thing you'll notice is that there's some color coding, but it's actually not meaningful to me. So you might get an orange one like this, which is a splitting of a signal. It wouldn't have to be an audio signal. It could be, it could be this signal from the sequencer here. This is the sequencer unit, which is actually one of my favorite modules. It has 4 mini adjustments like you would in a modular setup for the gates or something like that. On a sequencer, you can adjust the tuning, and there's opportunities here as well to adjust the clock options. So it actually has quite a bit for a very small module. So if we start very simple, I'll actually take out my RGB light, which is maybe a little annoying, and I can just start actually with nothing more than, and we'll start with these sound demos, and then we'll go through more and more of the features and the different options and so forth. Okay, I had to repower. I'm going to go in. I know there's a feature change in the NTS1 as we're getting blasted here. The power off is kind of annoying after 30 minutes. It does that. So I'll use the NTS1 only for a few effects. And so to start off, I might just have a simple plate reverb. We'll do that, and I can adjust the time and the depth of it. So very simple. I have my sequencer unit going. Again, the power unit, which is a splitter here if I need a second source of power. The power unit is simply running the sequencer. I can adjust the tempo of that, get it where I want, and I can later show you just some of the different waveforms available. This is the simple oscillator unit. By the way, if you're wondering right now, all these knobs in here, the littleBits come stock with these, and not unlike my Folk Tech knobs, I absolutely hate these. I don't know how you find them, but I find like just trying to work with these and trying to turn them, you can't see where, other than by feel, you can't see where the lowest and highest values are in terms of the potentiometers, and they just are really wonky to work with. So my brilliant idea was I would take some of these and add the guitar pedal knobs that you can find on various stores, including eBay or Etsy or wherever you like. And I did that with the NTS1 as well. It has those same knobs, and I just absolutely kind of despise them. I discovered, though, that I couldn't do that with all of the modules. With the sequencer, I will run into an immediate issue. If I try to put 2 of these together, they're not going to fit. So that's a little unfortunate. I could probably find some smaller knobs that would just go over this and maybe give me a line to show my point of value and also give me a little more tactile experience. I just cannot work with these. So I think for the sequencer, I'll just deal with that. But for the oscillators, I put on these blue knobs, and those just screw right on. They're really easy, and I'm doing that with my Folk Tech as well, because I find, like with the mescaline, the same issue. It just is not very easy to adjust values on the sequencer. It's not easy to adjust these, and these are, I think, just give you a little more tactile experience. I also wanted to color coordinate, because one of the issues I have with the littleBits is you can't tell a module from another. They look exactly the same. I mean, the filter has a trigger input, which is really useful, as you'll see in a second, but they're the same color, and I can read the text, but it's very small to show me that this is the delay and this is the filter. So I couldn't fit 2 knobs on here, I could fit one of these smaller knobs, just barely fits, and then one of the color-coded ones. So my concept is going to be oscillators will always be blue, filters will be red, delay units will be white, and then last, black will be my envelope module. Okay, so that way I can differentiate between the blocks. And one of the fun things about the Korg littleBits is you can really go in and experiment. It's very tactile, it's very cool looking, and not unlike our big version of it here with modular, you can put things in line with one another, you can modify one module with another in a way that I feel really replicates a modular or semi-modular experience. And so we're seeing it right here. We just have a simple oscillator. I'll adjust the pitch of it. That reverb's a little big. Just a little bit of reverb is good for us. And so that shows you that. I will actually adjust the waveforms here. You're actually getting, so I'm doing it with a screwdriver, so you're getting interference there as it's touching it. We'll go back to our first waveform. They're just really hard to adjust with a finger. But so very simple, right? You have an oscillator. I could, if I wanted to, we could just do this on the fly. Let's take our CV module. So this is a trigger out, so I could use that for another purpose to trigger something. But let's go ahead and we'll take a CV in. So maybe I'll take, let's see here. So in this particular case, what it was doing, it was adding a rhythm at the front of the sequencer, but really it's choking that sequencer. So I don't think that's a good placement for the module. And one of the things you'll discover with the littleBits is that you can adjust your modules in various ways to really get the best modulation and effects on your sound, on your sequence as you would like. Okay, so what I did was there's a voltage setting on the CVN. So I have maths running into it, which is one of our more useful modules. You get the effect. It seems to be... Okay, hold that thought. Just as I'm talking about battery power, check out my battery. It's dead. So the good news is I can put another battery in here. I should get an adapter for this. They do have a USB adapter that you could get. When I took this on a cruise to do my microenvironment series, I had a bunch of these batteries. You could get rechargeables. And check it out now. It's going to be a lot better. Okay, so yeah, our juice was running out basically. Okay, so that was coming out of radar, envelope, generator. Let's do a rhythm from chance. Perhaps turn up the clock here. Not as interesting. I have it going in maths again. Or rather, I should say maths is going into the CDN. So it just, gives you a sense that you can do, primitive CV control of the unit. So it's certainly one thing to think about for your possible uses. We can get a little more complex. And so you could think of this like this is your standard oscillator that you would get in a UREC module. Now, again, if I look at any of my oscillator modules, I'll probably have how many parameters I can adjust, in and outs, modulation points, abilities to change the sound, use it as an LFO with another module. And again, I'm doing all that with patch cables. In this case, I'm doing it with these blocks, and there aren't any cables to speak of other than a few power cables, which for me is a cool creative opportunity. I've said in some of my other videos that I think it'd be really cool to think about opportunities to take smaller setups and to even have them physically in different spaces in your studio or home office area, such that you can get different sonic and modular and audio explorations going on for your compositions or sonic experiments. So for me, it's a cool thing that it has lacking some of the abilities to do traditional modulation that you would with your modular or semi-modular gear. So we can take our oscillator, and I think it'd be useful, right? An oscillator, we typically want some building blocks. We'll save the delay for us in a little bit, but we might want, as you noted here, they're just kind of flopping together. I'm looking for here it is. I'm looking for my envelope. So obviously with an envelope, I can adjust the attack and decay of my oscillator. You'll hear this immediately. Hearing some of that reverb from the NTS-1. So I can, of course, adapt the attack, a longer attack. And you see kind of why you want knobs that indicate the low and the high values, the median values, because that way you know what you're adjusting. In fact, some of these I probably need to go and paint because they're pretty cheap, but they fit really well in this case on my knobs. So I can adjust the decay a bit as well. And maybe that's a sound I like. I can go in and tweak the sequencer, adjust the pitches. And, for a 4-step pitch sequencer, it actually, I think, is pretty good for what you have here and the abilities of it to generate interesting sequences. You're not going to get anything fancy like repeats or different scale modes or arpeggiator modes, obviously, but again, very small unit, and you can expect simplicity in terms of all the components. Now, if I want to, let's say, add a filter, I could do that as well, and I'm going to put the delay in there just because we'll be using it. So I'll put the filter at the end. You can always experiment. A lot of your UREC modules will have abilities. The NTS has an ability to decide with the internal settings where each of the points in the sound, such as your effects, come. Do they come before or after the oscillator? And so it's kind of a cool thing you can do with a lot of modules. One that comes to mind in that sense is, you can't see, it's the qubit prism. I really like how you can adjust the signal path, and it's a very cool feature. So to do that with your Korg littleBits, you will do that by physically placing and removing modules in various places. And I encourage you to experiment. Put the filter before the oscillator, after it, add the delay at different points. We can also go in and really adjust, particularly useful in this sense, we can adjust the parameters of the envelope and also the filter. So we'll be doing that in a second. Let's turn the delay down. On the delay, you have time and feedback. On your filter, as you might imagine, you have cutoff, frequency, and peak. And you can create some really cool effects. A lot of people have compared some of the sounds in the filter to the Korg MS-20. I mean, I'm always amazed at just what I can do with a few of these blocks and taking one output, throwing into some effects, and I really have something I think quite useful here. So I can adjust the filter a little more. Getting our audio rate stuff going on there. You get a real range. I've noticed with this filter, you can get sort of vowel type sounds from it. You can do a lot of effects that sound like ring modulation. I mean, I really like this particular filter. One of the cool things, as I mentioned, is we can go in right now and add other blocks to modulate both the filter and our envelope. And that's really cool because it, again, is really replicating some of the modularity of this bigger unit that many of us are familiar with in terms of modular and semi-modular gear. Let's see, what did I just... This is one of the things about the kit. Okay, so what I have going on here in all this cable confusion, is just I'm trying to split my power off, because one of the issues that comes up, and you can get a second power unit or a third one. Again, each of those would require another 9-volt battery or a USB power. But you have to power any unit, of course, that's going to modulate another unit. So if I want to do something here with my envelope, let's put in a pulse. I really like the pulse module. Okay, here's the pulse module. So it has a very simple adjustment, but in a sense, this is a mini sequencer, and you can create some interesting effects with it. So we'll just stick that in there. You always know if it's the correct orientation, just because the magnet will push inward, will attach, or push outward. So right now, we'll have to power it, and we'll hear sound again. Okay, see, you hear that choking on our envelope. So again, I can adjust the speed of my pulse unit. And that allows me to create different syncopations of rhythm. And one of the cool things you can do, you could use more than one sequencer module at different points in your chain of your sound. And you could either, using, of course, the trigger out, you could control the timing of your second sequencer or third sequencer by using, the main, as a, if you will, as a master clock. But I can also do it by ear, and I think that's kind of fun too. So we can just create some rhythms there, all the way to kind of like audio rate. So again, possibilities there. I'll remove that. I actually think the filter is a little cooler in terms of some of those effects. We can try the pulse going into the filter. Let's give that a shot. We're getting that really fat, almost like acid type bass there. Loving that. Hey, guess what? The NTS shut off again. The most annoying feature on the NTS-1. Okay, so I got to redo my reverb. Let's pull up a plate, and we should be back in business. Remind me to change that setting. So annoying. So listen to how that pulse module really brings the filter in and out. It just creates this interesting rhythmic array, and we can again adjust the peak and the cutoff. It's pretty cool. and we get a little audio rate action, which is creating almost like you hear that dirty phasing. So what's cool about that pulse module is you can't just rely on it only really for rhythm. You can do some interesting things at its max value, creating those really squelchy sounds that gives you a different character for your oscillator and your filter. Just love that a lot. Very cool. We can go back in, and the delay module is actually really cool. I don't know, is this a bucket brigade style delay, but it has, you know, two simple adjustments, but very cool. We can adjust the feedback, get nice kind of reverb, second almost reverb type effect there with the feedback, and I can adjust the time as well. So that's getting pretty cool. Now, if I wanted to, let's take our pulse unit out, and I really enjoy the use of a second oscillator, again denoted in my system with blue. You get a little resistance there, so it goes this way. I'm going to put my oscillator in here. And so what's happening here is we're using this like we would an LFO in our modular or semi-modular setup. And just listen how cool this is, running the second oscillator into our filter. We're also hearing the polyrhythmic stuff coming, those kind of fast delays from our delay unit. And what I love about the littleBits is not unlike your modular setup, it's encouraging experimentation, and thus my reason for saying I would take this over to CS80 on a desert island, because I feel like what you can do by simply rearranging the combinations of various modules, think of all the permutations, do the math on it, you can do a ton with adding particularly oscillators to your setup. Just check out the sound. And then I encourage you, as you would with your modular, semi-modular setup, go back and adjust other modules after you've chained in and added a new modulator, in this case, an LFO. Just listen to that sound. I'll go back to my primary oscillator. Just listen to that. Bring up the pitch. Adjust my envelope. Shorter attacks, shorter releases. Take my delay out a little bit. I could always throw in at any time another modulation effect, and again, use any of the effects pedals you want. Very easy to do, and again, experiment, use different effects pedals as you like. I can add a cool delay modulation effect here on the NTS1. It's a bit of a looper effect, I love it. It has changed the oscillator type. Listen to what we're getting using two simple oscillators and a little magic from the NTS1. That's very interesting, certainly, to say from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units, plus the power, the speaker out, and our NTS1 using its multi-effects. Again, as I've said in some other videos, using the NTS1, you can't go wrong. 3 simultaneous effects, plus you get the Synth engine, which has your oscillator built in. So just an amazing unit for a desktop setup. I think it's the best unit on the market right now that does what it does for 99 bucks. So listen to that right now. I mean, if that's not cool, if that's not interesting sonically, I don't know. You're getting this level of sound from remarkably, right, what is argued to be really kids' toys. And there are other, the Blipbox, there are other synthesizers out there right now that are in some ways marketed towards children, but can also be used by adults. And again, I really encourage you to there's a whole tradition, if you look at experimental artists who take toys, Look Mom No Computer, right, he might take old video games and create synthesizer systems just using the built-in sounds of those old gaming units. And so to use the littleBits in this way, I think allows you for some real great levels of innovation. We can add even more interest to our blocks here. We can take love this particular unit. It is a random generator. It has a noise function and a random function. So let's check that out. This should cause some warbling here of our oscillator. We'll start with the random setting. Let's see what happens. It's a little hard to hear. If I adjust my filter, it's a very subtle effect. Let's turn it to the noise setting. Now we get a change. We're getting a dirty, in a way, this almost makes it like a distortion being added to our primary or a secondary oscillator, which is our modulation oscillator, just affecting our filter block. Pretty cool. We can also experiment with any number of other blocks. Our pressure sensor. Doesn't work as well on this particular case. It's just basically choking our secondary oscillator. That's kind of cool. You can add the secondary sequencer. It's not having as dramatic an effect as our primary sequencer is on our primary oscillator, but we can adjust the tempo. You're not really hearing those tempo changes per se. Yes, you kind of are, depending on the settings of the filter. You hear that right there? It has almost like a vowel quality to it, doesn't it? You hear that? I can maybe go in and do a different reverb. Put it on our riser reverb. Gets a little crazy. I can adjust the wet, dry, all the way wet, all the way dry. There you hear the pure sound without any effect. Just put a little bit of wet on there, huh? It's pretty nice. Okay. I'm actually going to just go back to my original plate reverb, just so I can hear what's going on here. Let's try one more. Let's put our unit here. It's coming out of maths. We're going to hook up our CV input to see if it will sound good affecting the filter. I may have to adjust my filter settings, right, to get this to work. And I make no claims to compatibility of some of your modules. Again, really experiment. It's like any of your Eurorack modules. You know, if you find that using the CV block to control your filter doesn't really do much for you, which it actually is kind of doing a lot here as I'm adjusting maths, which is like That's pretty nice right there. We're getting a little stuttering there, you hear, choking the filter. We're also getting a little buzz. There's some interference. I'm not sure where that's coming in, but I'm hearing a bit of a buzz. So, who knows, right, where that interference is coming from. Let's try a different module. Yeah, and so that interference was coming, presumably, when I put maths in. I could plug in my radar envelope. We'll adjust it here. Yeah, you're hearing a little bit of an effect, but it's not as dramatic as if I were using it directly with the Eurorack here. What about pink noise or white noise? That's pretty cool. So you see, if I take out chance, the rhythm output, it is really affecting the filter. Let's do that again. I can hit the coin toss button to get a new rhythm going. That was pretty damn cool. Alright. If you don't think that's cool, I don't know. I don't know what to say. That's pretty damn cool. I'll try maths one more time. Okay, so you get the idea of bringing in some audio rate modulation from radar with our envelope. Again, I really like just using one or two oscillators, and you can really get some interesting effects if you add a second one. And if we wanted to, we could stick a little noise in between. Just again, experiment with your different modules and see combinations and orders, sequences as you work with your little bits. And I have it backwards. There we go. Magnet, and let's see what happens. I'm going to take out the modulation effect. Maybe we'll just leave some chorus or ensemble. It's not too harsh. And what's our reverb? Plate reverb? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, check that out. So that little like phasing sound coming in, that's our noise generator from our random module. Just listen to that little nice buzz. I'm going to crank our reverb a little bit more. Just look at or listen to the interplay of our third oscillator with our noise unit. Again, we can switch it to random to try something different. And that's kind of cool, because that's showing you some of that randomness affecting the pitch of this oscillator. It's very percussive and choppy. I was trying to reduce the harshness of that a little bit. Struggling. That's starting to sound really like a sample and hold module, which I think for practical purposes is what the random module is really all about. We're getting almost a 8-bit chiptune kind of sound there. Go back to our noise setting. So yeah, I mean, it's just really, I find with this littleBits synthesizer kit, the sky really is the limit. So just wanted to give you that introduction to what you might be getting into if you decide to pick up a littleBits. We'll go into all of the features. We'll look at the modules. I'll talk about add-ons. We'll talk about how you might use it in your setup. I'll show you what the box looks like when you get it. The box has a pretty cool manual that is maybe geared towards kids or DIY hacker type people who like experimenting with things, because certainly there are instructions to take this and make your own mini synthesizers. It wouldn't take too much of an effort to create your own custom boards that you could use to mount these on. They do have boards available. One thing that I have struggled with is the fact that if you have a heavy cord coming out of the speaker unit, and for convenience, I take the speaker out, but it just plugs right in there, which makes it cool if you're just messing around, even in a car or something, not driving, of course. You have your 9-volt, and you could make some sounds right there. But one disadvantage of this is over time, you will get issues potentially with this, just too much weight popping up one of the modules, and thus you lose your sound, your circuit that is currently running. So I think it's just a really amazing kit, and I wanted to bring it to you because I've had this kit for many years now. I've been adding modules. Again, I just bought, hopefully, my last kit on eBay. Got it for a steal at around 80 bucks. The typical price of this, the basic set, which I'll show you in a little bit here, is maybe around $130 now. Maybe demand issues I've seen as high as $200 new, which I think is a little spendy. You could argue that even for 130 bucks, it is somewhat expensive, but you are getting a couple of oscillators, a delay unit, an envelope, a sequencer, a mini keyboard, which for me is the most worthless of the modules. We'll take a look at it later. I don't think it's worth much to me. And then again, if you want to add on other modules, you can certainly purchase them from littleBits or other sources, and then add things as you might fancy. So in the remainder of this video, let's look at the Korg littleBits, how you might use it in your setup, the unboxing experience, some of the sound opportunities, add-on modules, and other features of the Korg's littleBits, which for me is a synthesizer that can really rival some of my modular and semi-modular gear. So let's take some further exploration into this synthesizer now. Okay, so I had a pretty long overview there of working with the littleBits. I just want to show you now exactly what you get if you buy the basic kit. I'll mention throughout this video that the availability of these kits online is sketchy, so you can sometimes find them on the used market. You can look on Amazon, you can look on eBay probably for the best prices. You could order some of the modules directly from Spiro, but I've noticed that there isn't a wide availability right now of the Korg's littleBits kit, which is the entire synth kit. You get all these modules, and we'll go through those in just a second. I think when Korg and littleBits did this collaboration, they did a really nice job because they just did I'm way into packaging and marketing. I just love this box, and you could actually kind of convert this box into a mini modular setup. There's a project information sheet available for that. So you get 2 trays of your modules, and then you get your instruction manual. And the instruction manual is quite beautiful, and just in terms of the design. And by the way, you can download that online as a PDF. I'll show you some examples of that later in this video. But the box itself, I think, is fairly good. I'll mention later in the video today that you might want to get a nice plastic kit just to store your littleBits, and also to think about color coordinating them as I've done with the knobs. So we can just go through the manual here. It offers some of the various ideas behind both electronic music and also behind some of the circuits that are possible with your littleBits kit. It talks a little bit also about the nature of sound here, so it'll tell you what a sine wave is and what amplitude is and timbre is. So I think they were really thinking about using this as a kit for younger people, which is pretty cool. The history of the synthesizer. And then here, learning your littleBits modules. Again, there's some color coordination of them, although I tend to notice those color coordinated moments less than maybe others. It just shows you that you get the keyboard and the sequencer. It goes through some of the other bits that you get here. I sometimes refer to these as modules in a video or bits. To me, it really does remind of a modular setup in terms of blocks, right? In terms of individual modules. And it's one of the cool things about working with littleBits. And so you get a little bit about the synth and popular culture, and then you can try out the various circuits. And so this could be really fun for kids. And one of the things that littleBits is all about, and the Korg's littleBits as a synthesizer setup is all about, is tapping into that whole DIY Arduino maker culture that's out there. People are interested in creating circuits and prototyping. There's so much fun stuff you can do, and I think that's part of the attraction to littleBits for me. I'm really surprised, though, that there hasn't been as much interest in the musical community, and again, I think because of this kind of stuff where they show projects like making your own guitar or making your own disc jockey, turntable, or something like that, it strikes you a little more as something for kids. But there's a lot of stuff out there. I use all the time a toy piano in my musical compositions, which is maybe designed for kids, and it has a wonderful sound to it. So don't feel ashamed in using any of the littleBits just because it has that marketing more maybe towards younger people or children. And this shows you how you could make kind of a performance setup with your littleBits as well, which is kind of cool. Again, I think they're really thinking of everything here in terms of even trying to mimic a little bit a modular or semi-modular setup. Again, for me, what's cool about littleBits is the fact that you can very visually see, as you've probably noted throughout this demo, there's our keytar. I don't know about that. You can state your own opinions in the comments. How's that? But I like the fact that you can create your own physical modular setup by taking your bits and putting them in order. And it's so easy to patch one bit in front and then on the opposite side of the other bit, put your filter before your oscillator, or vice versa, just to see what you get sonically when you have those moments of experimenting with the placement of your littleBits. And so now we can just go through what you get in the littleBits kit itself. So in your kit, you will of course get a power module, again, that uses a 9-volt battery. Later in the video, I highly recommend that you replace that with a charger. You also will get the speaker output. I've removed the speaker, it just unplugs. It Velcros on there. It's not a very good speaker, so you probably wouldn't want to use that for much of anything. You get the keyboard module. I think at some point in this video I said the keyboard module is bad. I'm actually thinking it's good now. I'll get to that later in the video. The sequencer module is one of my favorites. You also get 2 oscillators. Again, I've done the color coding. I've changed all the knobs. You get a filter module right there. Very useful module. You get the is the ADSR, I believe. Yes, the envelope. Hard to see the text there. And then this is the delay module. Delay module is also very cool, adjusting the feedback. And again, I think throughout this video you're going to be quite surprised with just the level of quality that you can get out of something this small and this toy-like. There's the mix module. I'll refer to that throughout the video today. It allows you to take 2 signals and to dial them in. We'll look at that a little bit later as I go through the sounds. And that is your splitter. It basically splits an audio or other signal, including a sequencer signal. And again, I'm showing you those knobs there, which I used to better color coordinate my littleBits so I can tell my oscillators apart from my filters and so forth. So that's a little bit of an overview of the modules that you get with the kit. Next, let me take you through the bits and kind of show you, including sonic examples where possible, what these sound like and how you might use them in your littleBits setup. Okay, so in this next section, we're going to take a look at the different bits that you can use with the Korg littleBits kit. So this is one of our first ones, our oscillator. And you of course heard earlier in the video quite a few of these, but we're trying to just play these here in isolation so you could hear the difference between the various sounds. And of course you can choose from 2 different waveforms with the oscillator, so it's not like a full-fledged synthesizer, but I think again it's enough to definitely get you started. And there is a tuning control on there and also a pitch control. And so one of the things we can try out is we can begin to stack a series of these oscillators to see how they sound working together in tandem. And so here's an example then of stacking a group of oscillators. In this case we'll stack 2 together. And I think you can see you can get some really interesting sounds. And keep in mind that you can use your oscillators really as an LFO when you start modulating some of the inputs such as the filter in. It makes it quite interesting in terms of the sound. Also nice to combine these with some of the noise blocks that we can look at later. So I've got 4 oscillators now. Again, a basic kit comes with 2, so you can kind of just think about whether or not it's going to do the job in terms of just working with 2 oscillators at a time. You can definitely produce some really interesting tones. It does take some work when you start to stack not just oscillators but any blocks together. You really have to think about, in this case, the leftmost block next to the battery. So sometimes in this case, if you tune one oscillator radically high or low, you might actually not hear any sound at all. So you have to really experiment with all your blocks when you're setting them up, particularly those leftmost blocks that might have an impact on what's happening down the chain. And that's one difference between, say, the little blocks and a modular or semi-modular system. Now this is where I'm actually eating my words a little bit, because I had talked about earlier in this video that the keyboard module was worthless. And I think it's worthless just playing single notes, but I didn't realize until I did this video, I kid you not, that there's a little, right there where my finger is, a little switch that you press, and you can go from momentary to latch. And so that's really cool, actually. So the fact that you can use the keyboard module to create a latch function, like I'm doing here, makes the module all worth it. So I take back everything bad I ever said about the keyboard module with littleBits, because it actually is useful for doing those drones. So now we're putting the filter in, and listen to this filter. Just listen to the resonance here. Again, a lot of people have said that the Korg littleBits kit is nothing more than a toy, but I think when you hear some of these examples today, and these are all unaffected, these are straight coming out of the littleBits into my mixer here on the video, you hear that this is a really decent filter, and you can create some really nice sonic effects with it. So we'll continue to experiment with the blocks here. In this case we have the delay module, and I actually should have probably had this hooked up with a sequence, but it has a really nice feedback circuit on it, so that sounds really nice, and you can also adjust the time. And so the delay module is very cool with percussive things. Now I have the sequencer module set up. And the sequencer module is really one of my favorites. It's pretty versatile. It's 4 steps, and you can adjust the pitch of each of the 4 steps. And you can also do some interesting things with other modules in terms of really affecting the parameters of it. Right now I've got ADSR, we've got an envelope going. So of course with this we can control the attack and the release, and so we can go for percussive sounds like this, or in other cases we could go for longer drony sounds that maybe are more useful for ambient music applications. So versatility with that block for sure. And next we're setting up another oscillator here to try to just do a little bit of modulation on the envelope, and it maybe isn't as noticeable as it is with the filter. What I've done there is, you can see I've used the power block module and I've chained it such that I'm getting power to my other module, because anytime I stick another module outside of that main chain, I've got to power it somehow, either with a second power block or using one of my splitters. And of course that will drain your battery more quickly, so another good reason really to get, as I'm talking about in this video, an adapter for your 9-volt. So here we have hooked up the sequencer is first, followed by the LFO, and that's going into the filter. And what's nice about the filter block is that it has that input. It's something you really do need in a filter, so you can have that ability to alter it in some interesting ways. So this is an example of the mix module. So the mix module is hooked up to the chain of each of these sequences. So we have 2 sequencers, an oscillator in blue, and then at the end we have the tail, if you will, of the mix module. This goes into that module with the 2 black dials, and then what you can do is completely turn the level down for one or both and adjust it anywhere in between. So for me it's one of the more useful modules, because if you don't have more than one sound output, you really do have to think about controlling your mix prior to post-production, because you're stuck with whatever you have. Now in this case I attached a noise circuit at the end of one of the oscillator chains, so you can see it immediately changes the timbre of that circuit. I love this module. You get either a choice of noise or random, so I can flip it to random there. And I can also flip it back to noise, just to experiment a little bit. And in this case I think I'm putting random. Yep, I've got random in that top block there in front of the oscillator. So you're hearing the sequencer controlling the clock of that, but then just before we're hearing noise now, just before that, back again, we're hearing those random pitches. So it has a much more aleatoric quality to it than the sequencer module. getting that randomization. So by combining blocks, by moving them in between one another, changing the order, you can really begin to experiment with all the features here of the Korg littleBits. Now I have my pulse module, which is one of my favorite modules actually. It doesn't come with the main kit here, the littleBits Korg kit, so you have to order it separately. But it's very cool. It just creates a ratcheting sound, and you control the tempo of it. And you can almost get to like audio rate level, and then you can dial it back pretty slow. So for me, it's maybe the most useful module that is not included in the kit, second only to the CV module, which again, I feel like you really need to be able to control the in and the out clock speeds with your littleBits and your modular or semi-modular gear. And you're getting a sense here as I'm unplugging stuff of how it works. We're now putting the sequencer, or I'm sorry, we took the sequencer out and we're putting the pulse module as a modulation source for the filter. So now we're getting some really interesting tones, and this is the level of where I feel like you can get some very nuanced and even experimental sounds here with the filter being modulated by that incredible pulse module. And we can continue to experiment. So here's my pressure sensor module. This is a really cool one. This is an additional one I got through. Again, it's not working there because we need the power. Now it'll work. So I got this through the littleBits website. And it's just a pressure sensor. So it's kind of nice if you wanted to play a drum along with something, or cut your filter off here like I'm doing, create those little squelches, adjust the resonance as we go. It's, it's a pretty cool module for sure. You could do something similar with the keyboard module as well, but I feel like this pressure sensor module is really sensitive and it has a nice touch to it when you're trying to do percussive things. And now I added the noise sensor, or the noise block rather, in front, just between the pressure sensor and the filter. So now you're getting that nice, really white noise effect as it's being triggered by my finger with the pressure sensor. And so all in all, again, I think these are the main modules you'll probably encounter with the Korg littleBits. As you work with them, again, I encourage you to continue to experiment and to try different positions of modules and different blocks and see what works the best for you in your own synthesizer sonic setup. Okay, next we'll offer some tips here in terms of working with your littleBits. The first tip I'm going to offer to you here is simple in terms of organization of the littleBits, and that is the idea of getting a case. So any kind of case would work for this. You could use anything that has a variety of compartments. Hopefully, ideally, these would be compartments that are adjustable, where you can have smaller compartments, square size ones, rectangular, larger ones, and so forth. There are quite a few you can find at big box stores, Walmart, Target. This is one I found, I believe, at Walmart. You can also get them at the Home Depot, a variety of different types of cases that you can find. And the whole idea behind this is to simply better organize your littleBits. And I found that it was really challenging just working with the included kit. And in addition, I should add this as another tip, but it's too late. But I'll offer it to you now, is to think about the color coordination of your littleBits, which is something that I did using the knobs, blue for oscillator, red for filter, and so forth. And it just makes it a little bit easier if you're working with the littleBits in a performance setup, working in your studio, trying to get something going. And again, having a good case with organization like this is going to go a long way in terms of avoiding some of that frustration. If you just throw them all in a shoebox or something like that, they will actually attach to one another because of the magnets. They're not the easiest thing to store, and as well as we've learned, they're not the easiest thing to use, things to use in terms of just the magnets and the fact that you have to constantly fuss with them. And I'll offer another tip here. Again, these are just tips to get you started thinking about how you might use your littleBits and avoid some of the frustration that sometimes comes with using these very small synthesizers. think about the power source. So I've mentioned this a couple times throughout this video that I will be working, I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me. I'm working with my littleBits, and all of a sudden the power goes out and I'm just like, what's going on? And at first I don't often realize that that is indeed the issue. So what I just did, I haven't received it yet, but I ordered a cheap adapter on Amazon, 12 bucks. This is just going to then plug in where you'll see in a second where the 9-volt battery terminal is. I think this is going to make it a lot easier for me in terms of working with my littleBits in the future, because I'm constantly running out of juice on my batteries and I'm asking myself, why the heck do I not get an adapter? The other thing that's challenging with the adapter, and you'll see this a little bit later when I talk about really trying to hold your littleBits down on a board with clamps or some system, is that battery itself, along with that cord, creates problems. Anytime you get something heavy, could be a cable, could be the battery, and anything that's protruding upwards or downwards, you might run into some issues with your littleBits, because then it's going to push them out of alignment and maybe even cause them to come apart and you'll lose your audio signal during a performance. Okay, and our next tip today is a really handy one because it's something specific to littleBits, is to consider your audio outs. And by this, what I'm specifically talking about is the fact that you have one main audio out. And even though you're required to use one of those splitter cables I'm going to show you here in a second, you have to keep in mind that anytime you just have one output, everything that's going into all those blocks before that output means they will be mixed in with that. Now, I'll show you in some other sections about how you can deal with this. Certainly using the mix module helps. The mix module allows you to very easily, say, take 2 sounds or more. Again, you can string as many modules as you want together. So if you strung a number of mix modules together, you could actually deal with this issue. Now, what I'm showing you here is I actually ended up buying multiple littleBits kits. So each of these gives me one output. So what that means is if one of these outputs is a 2 oscillator drone, the second one is a white noise sound being triggered by a sequencer, I can run those all separately into my mixer, and thus I am not predetermined in my final mix because of that fact that everything is coming pre that final mix block on the littleBits. So it does present a bit of a challenge in terms of thinking about your mix when you're working with littleBits at any level. And our next tip here is super important. It's very unique to littleBits, and again, the joy and the frustration of working with these small devices is they're portable, they're blockable in terms of the magnets, but you have to figure out a way to bolt them down. So a real number one tip is, in addition to the power tip that I just offered you, is to really think about ways of securing your littleBits to whatever surface you're working with. There are a number of ways of doing this. And quite obviously, when you see a chain like this, a couple oscillators, a sequencer all tied together, those are magnetically holding together, but they're not super strong. And again, if you get any protrusions, if you get cords, if you get your battery module, your output module, all of a sudden you could have a cord or two, the CV module is another one that comes to mind, that is forcing your littleBits up or to the side in such a way that you're actually losing your signal path. It's actually coming apart. So these are some options here. These are different clamps you can find at any kind of big box store, a Home Depot, a Lowe's, or a Walmart. They offer a way to really clamp down your synthesizer in such a way that hopefully you will prevent this from happening. They also sell specialized Lego adapters, and if you look at the bottom of the littleBits, you'll see these little grooves. Unfortunately, those are proprietary, so it won't fit in a typical Lego unless you get the proprietary adapters. And so that, gets into that issue of having to spend a little more money. I was thinking of trying to experiment with a drill and see if I could drill something out in wood. I haven't tried that yet, so I'll let you know later. Here's an example, though, where I was trying to hold these to actually a piece of balsa wood and run everything into my main modular setup. And so the challenge here was anytime I plugged a cable in, an output cable, a CV in or out using that CV module, I ran into issues. And that green cable there is an indicator, again, that could pull on your module. And as a result of that, you're going to have to figure out a way to clamp things down. And here I'm just tracing rather the signal path and what's happening. So the advantage of having the CV module allows you to really work with in and out signals to and from the littleBits. The challenge is it's going to pull up on your units, all your bits, your modules, and thus necessitating some creativity in terms of holding them down. And take a look at that power right there to the left. As you can see, it's popping up there because of the battery, and it's just presenting a problem in terms of working with littleBits in a practical sense. And another challenge with that actually relates to just simply trying to lay out your entire system in such a way that you have enough room on your desk or on your surface. If I'm working on this surface here, I have to think about modules that may force me to move at right angles or 180-degree angles depending on what block I'm adding. And as a result of that, it may present some challenges just in terms of the actual, physical layout. Now, here's another tip for you. Do get the CV module. It could run anywhere around $20 or maybe more if you can find it. And I've noticed lately, this is the end of 2020 moving into 2021, it's a little hard finding some of the littleBits modules. And so if you're able to get the CV module, I really recommend it. It gives you an in and an out, and so you can sync to and from your littleBits. Very key. If you don't have it, it's not unlike then the Elotone multi-synth, where you might have to use it in a way that is unsynced. And that's certainly fine if you're doing drones or whatever. But again, very useful to be able to take this signal, run it out of the littleBits, take that clock, put it into any of my modular or semi-modular musical instruments and setup, and instantly be able to control the clock. Likewise, I could take a clock out of Chance, out of Hermit, my sequencer there, run into my littleBits, and be able to better, of course, then control the tempo of my musical composition. So I really recommend this module as that one extra module that you should definitely buy above and beyond that basic starter kit that you get with the Korg's littleBits kit. Okay, and my next tip is, since we're just talking about the CV module, do consider other modules to purchase. So I think, what you have in the basic synth kit that you get with the Korg's littleBits that we saw in the unboxing is certainly sufficient to get you started, but 2 oscillators are a limitation. Also, you might want more than one filter. You might want some of the additional modules like the pulse module. Because that's the case, you may end up looking into purchasing some of these. I really recommend going to Spiro's website. They produce or create littleBits, and you can look at all the various available modules. Some of these are not only going to be for audio, but for other more, computational Arduino-y type things. They have projects included in here. Some of this is geared at kids, obviously, but what you can do is go through the various modules and see if any of these might be useful for you. For example, in this video today, I talk about the prototyping module that you can buy, and you can use that with some of the sensors that would be additional purchases, say, on Amazon. So the fact that you can interface with other things out there in the world, whether those be sensors, whether those be pressure devices, even the DC motors, the fans, the servo motors, really replicate. They don't have a solenoid, but it replicates some of what you can do in the electroacoustic world, say with the Coma Field Kit, or the Bastel various modules, the servo and the DC motor module. So you can actually do electroacoustic stuff using littleBits, although I've never seen anyone ever even refer to it or use it in that sense, which is kind of strange. And I think when they marketed, as you can see here, this is the kit that is included with the basic synth kit. These are all the modules and the circuits you can make. But I think they marketed it in such a way that they were thinking of it in very traditional electronic music senses, but to market, say, an add-on electroacoustic kit would be really cool. You can add a couple of those blocks, and all of a sudden you'd be doing some very cool things. And you could use those to interact with, say, they do sell a sound sensor. They even sell an MP3 player device. So you could do some interesting things with your littleBits chain in your setup by using, say, some of those electroacoustic possibilities, but not really something that I've seen a lot of, at least on YouTube or anywhere on the web. Now, another recommendation is you consider other modules. Look at the used market. You can certainly go to Sphero's site and look at all the official ones and order directly from them. I actually did order a number of modules from them because I couldn't find them on eBay. When you look through eBay, you'll see a variety of different kits. You just want to make sure, again, that if you're getting the kit that is primarily for sound and music, that is what in the past has been called the Korg littleBits kit. Now those are upwards of $150 online, so I know the prices have gone up, and maybe that's part of the supply and demand issue going on. But you can just look through the eBay market. You can also go to Amazon. I find they're a little more expensive there. In some cases, you could make a bid or you can make an offer and get something for a fairly good price, and I got really lucky with being able to buy an entire littleBits kit for just around $80 on eBay. And back to the specific modules, I'll just give you my recommendations of some that might be useful. You can see that 308 splitter is pretty good. Again, the CV module I very much recommend. You might want to get another noise and random out. They have the same function, so therefore you could use those up quickly. I have at least 3 of those because I love the white noise sound and the random feature. Definitely the pulse module. That's my number one in addition to the CV module that you should get. It's really cool. You'll see that in the video. The RGB light I wouldn't recommend. The pressure sensor is pretty cool actually, and you'll get that demoed in my video today, so you'll get a chance to hear that. And then this is the module that's for prototyping, and I'll show you this in the video today where we go through attaching various sensors to be able to interact with your littleBits kit. So as you think about some of those modules, definitely think about what your setup is and how you could work with any additional modules that might expand the sonic or other capabilities of your littleBits setup. Okay, since I've covered a number of the features in previous sections of this video, I want to focus just on using one specific block in this particular video, and that is the block that allows for prototyping or sensors. And this is the W9 module, which I'm holding up here, right there. We'll look at it some more in depth. It's obviously really small, but does quite a bit. So I definitely recommend that you go to Sphero's site for littleBits and just type in, you could do a Google search, littleBits W9 Proto module. And so again, this is going to allow you to do a lot of interesting things as far as setting up your own circuits. So you could set up external breadboards and have those control or modify the sound or other aspects of your littleBits synth kit and project. Also, for my use, it's really about using various sensors that you can purchase on Amazon and other sites. And so I really recommend my video experimenting with sensors that I did years back, and thank you for the 5,471 people or so who watched it. And this was my attempt to get into using the sensor block with the Coma Field Kit. And I have to say one thing off the bat here is that I was much more successful in that video in working with sensors and using them with the Coma Field Kit and their dedicated block for that than I was in this particular experiment using my littleBits. And it could be the fact that I was working on this relatively quickly, trying to finish this video up, but I just wasn't as successful. So when you hear some of the sonic results, I think certainly you can improve on what I've done here. So if you get this module, which you see right there, you will want to possibly use the tiny screwdriver that comes with it, but I really recommend one of those, a much hardier screwdriver, a metal one that allows you to unscrew those teeny screws. So there's more information than I can state in this video today about sensors and the various leads. What you can do though very simply is if there's 3 prongs, which there are on the W9 module, and you have 3 prongs on your sensor module, what you can do is try to always keep the middle terminal the same, so the middle line is always the middle in both of those modules, and then experiment with the two terminals on the opposite sides, so on the far sides of that module. And then that way, as we're hearing some sound here with my motion sensor, you can be better assured that you're getting the proper effect. You'll also note on the sensor there that I'm actually coming out of the out. There's an in and an out on the sensor module, so you can certainly experiment with different configurations, as I always recommend doing with the littleBits kit. But my results were not as dramatic. I found there was some lag there with the motion sensor. It wasn't nearly as fine an experience, say, as nuanced an experience as I did happen to have with my Coma Field Kit sensor walkthrough and experiments. So this next one is a water sensor. And you can put it in a small thing of water. You can also have moisture on your hands. Again, I'm trying to really fix it. This has 4 pins on it, so again, you have to experiment. These are often labeled. Sometimes the labeling happens in the instruction manual that you might get as you're hearing a few of the squeaks and squawks of that sensor. But if you buy a sensor kit from Amazon, say, you might actually go look there, and it will likely have a PDF you can download, and it'll tell you which is your ground, which is your hot voltage, and so forth. And in just a little bit, you're actually going to see me get a little minor shock. It was actually unexpected, so you certainly want to be careful. Even though it's only a 9-volt battery running here, you can definitely get a shock from doing some of these experiments. So what I just recommend is experimenting. If you have either read your instruction manual and find out where to connect your terminals, or as I'm doing here, if there's 4, I could experiment with different connections until I get the desired result. I haven't found that I'm going to damage anything. And there it is. I added that smoke for effect. I got a little shock from touching an exposed part of that. So in any case, I think what would be cool about using sensors, again, my use of them quickly here with the W9 module was not as successful as I would have liked, would be to figure out exactly what you want to accomplish. One of the things that's cool about the Field Kit from Coma is you can imagine using sensors, and there are other modules out there, including a now no longer created Bastel module. There are also some others, Eurorack modules that allow you to do sensor configurations, working with the MIDI plant wave and sprout. Also the Instruo module, which I love, that allows you to do biometric feedback from plants and other things, including your human body, are cool opportunities to get into alternative control of your modular system or semi-modular system. Here I'm just showing that you can take a resistor, a transistor, an LED light, and you can include that as part of your signal path. I'm just using DuPont cables. I should have said that earlier. Kind of obvious, I'm using DuPont cables for everything. But that way you could do some breadboard prototyping if you wanted to set up some external circuits. And of course what you could do is you would need to figure out a little bit of technique here, is get a mini breadboard, get some very cheap on eBay or Amazon transistors, capacitors, other electronic components, hook those up on a breadboard, figure out how to prototype that, and then based on that you could have, I think, some really interesting circuits that could modify your sounds or signal paths on the littleBits. Here I'm trying to use a sensor. I got this to work with my Coma. It's one of these that will detect like you could write with a Sharpie, or if you had black paint, it'll detect a dark versus a light surface, and then will give you a sound or a sensory effect, if you will. Didn't work in this go round. So again, you could check out my Coma Field Kit video to get a little more insights about how to use some of these sensors, what they could do, and so forth. My purpose here was to simply introduce you to some of the possibilities, and again, depending on what you want to do, to go back to an earlier comment I was making, if you really wanted to create an installation, something with moving pieces, maybe even doing some electroacoustic aspects with your littleBits, you could create some really fascinating and interesting setups just using an entire littleBits kit. You could use a light sensor, as I was trying to do unsuccessfully here. You could set up a kit that had servo fans, DC motors. You could have some environmental things going on, and based on those interactions, that could be altering, say, sounds or even lights that would be triggered in your various blocks, depending on which blocks or bits that you choose to purchase. with your Korg's littleBits. So a somewhat unsuccessful use of the W9 module, but it does exist. So if it's your thing, you want to do prototyping, you want to set up some breadboards, some circuits, some resistors, some sensors, go for it, try it out. You can certainly do it. All you have to do is pick up the W9 module from Spiro, and you'll be set in terms of doing some of those experiments with your Korg littleBits. So now we're going to jump into some sonic examples using the Korg littleBits. There are quite a few different examples here, ranging from my Eurorack experiments, my Eurorack Yule-log from 2020. So check out these various experiments that I tried out. I think I got some very good sounds with the littleBits. If you're interested, you could always listen to the full-length versions of these by simply going to my YouTube page. So thanks for listening, and here are the sonic examples. Okay, so that is going to do it for us today here in this lengthy review of the Korg littleBits synth kit. Hopefully I gave you a good overview of what the synth kit is all about, some of the modules that you can purchase, some of the uses of those modules, their various sounds, and even some of the unique features like using sensors and some additional non-acoustic or electronic sonic bits with your littleBits kits. So if you decide to go this route, good luck. And as always, I appreciate hearing your comments and your videos and your experiments, in this case with the Korg littleBits synth kit. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more music and gear review videos like this in the future.